Hi, welcome back to Space Thoughts. This week I want to talk about an event that occurred in Maine, particularly Augusta, Maine, regarding the potential of a space industry in the state of Maine. And you're going to say, now, wait a minute. What does Maine and outer space have to do with each other? Maine doesn't do space. Maine isn't like Florida or Georgia or some of the southeastern states that are really a hub, or like Texas, that are really the hub of what we call the space industry. This is something that's really been percolating for the past couple years with a group of individuals, and it's actually been an organized effort to what is, in the end, hopefully going to be the introduction of a new industry as a whole into the state of Maine. Now, when you think of Maine, you think of lobster, you think of agriculture. Potatoes are very important in Maine. You think of the fishing industry, which is very large in Maine. But you don't think of space as being an industry that could thrive in Maine. But that is the goal right now of this group and of this resolution that was actually introduced into the Maine State Legislature this past week. Fundamentally, what there was back in February 2017, it was a 2-day workshop in Portland, Maine, and I was actually invited to this and attended one day. I couldn't make the second because of scheduling, but it was very interesting because they brought together a diverse group of people from around the state, from different aspects of the community, and even some people from the federal government and people from other states who are involved in the space industry, both from a technical standpoint and from a policy standpoint. It was very interesting the day that I attended, and there was a lot of good information passed along. But I got to admit, I was a little bit skeptical at the time, just because saying, this is a good idea, but the problem is you got to keep it moving, and you've got to keep the enthusiasm level high. So I kind of backed away from it for a while, but in the meantime, things were moving along. And one of the things that I was really looking for was some sort of legislative activity that would tell me that this is a serious effort and they really want to do this. Well, that's what happened this last week when they introduced that bill. Now, when I want to talk about a space legislation, in this case, I'm not talking about a domestic space law that basically, limits liability and such, things like Virginia, Florida, New Mexico, and other states have. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a bill that is going to create a council that will essentially study the issue of bringing an industry to Maine and what's going to take to put it together. And the whole idea is at the end of this period, I think they have till the end of next year, they have to file a report with the governor, I think by December 31st, 2021, with their findings. In other words, can we do this, how we're going to do it, what's going to cost, and what resources are needed. I think from there, it's a matter of where do we go, but that's down the road. Right now, I find this extremely encouraging because it looks like this bill is actually going to pass the Maine State Legislature and get signed into law and actually get moving. So that is, in my opinion, traction, and if they can keep the momentum going, I think it's going to turn out very well for them. So you ask, what kind of space industry can you have in Maine? Well, we're not going to be launching Falcon rockets, or they're not going to be launching Atlas rockets or any of these other big rockets. What they are going to be launching, though, or working at doing, is revolving the industry around small satellites. Now, when I talk about small satellites, everybody starts thinking about mega constellations like Starlink and like OneWeb, and the one Amazon is talking about putting into, or whereas a Blue Origin is developing. That's a totally different area altogether. But what Maine wants to do is actually create an industry that not only they study the engineering and develop technology, manufacture small satellites, and actually launch small satellites. Yeah, I said launch small satellites. Right now, there are 2 companies here in Maine that basically say that we're working on dedicated small sat launchers, and they plan on launching from Maine. And it's like, why do you want to launch from Maine? Well, that's a good question. And I asked that to one of these individuals who is working on a launcher, and their reply was polar orbit. Now, when I talk about polar orbit, I'm talking about orbits that run south to north or north to south. And essentially what that does, it gives you excellent coverage over the entire globe. And that's And the problem with polar launchers is sometimes you've got to launch over land masses. But in the case of Maine, land masses includes a lot of forest and to the south, a lot of ocean. So pretty much this grants it a very good area to facilitate these launches. That's down the road a little bit. Now, one of the things they want to do to facilitate these launches is they want to develop a spaceport, and that's actually part of this industry. But they also want to develop a mission control, and where they can actually control the launches of these satellites and operate these satellites. Because the idea is these satellites aren't going to be launched just to benefit companies that may provide services out of state. They're also designed to service the state of Maine itself. And when you look at small satellites and the capabilities they're developing, it's not out of the question that some of these satellites could develop remote sensing technologies that could monitor agriculture, monitor the oceans in terms of the fishing industry and especially the lobster industry. So these are all practical applications of small satellite technology that could benefit Maine directly, and not to mention the economic benefit of providing jobs, high-tech jobs, but also providing an academic basis as well. And actually one of the big problems Maine's been having over the past, I'd say, decade is that it produces a lot of good engineering students, or students in what we call STEM, but they all go out of state because there's no industrial base and no economic base to provide jobs from. One of the goals of creating a space industry in Maine is to actually provide jobs for those students so that they can stay here in Maine, and also to attract talent from other areas of the country and perhaps from other parts of the world. So when you look at a lot of the other spaceport proposals that are out there, like Georgia, and I think there's one in Michigan right now they want to put up, it's basically for a spaceport and not so much a space industry. And this is what makes Maine's goal a lot more ambitious in the long run, because basically the idea is they don't want one section of Maine to benefit. They want the whole state of Maine to benefit. And if you know anything about the state of Maine, it's a very large state. It has a lot of forest, and the demographics of Maine vary tremendously from one county to the other. And that brings an exceptional challenge into bringing an economic industry into play that will benefit everybody. But they think they can do it, and I'm of the opinion that they can do it as well, and if they're very creative and they're very savvy about how they approach this. Bottom line is, this bill to create this council is an important first step. And actually, the bill is online, and I'll just bring up a brief look at it right here. If you go through it, the bill is very short. Basically, it's going to create a council called the Maine Spaceport Complex Leadership Council, and it basically defines its membership, appointments to who's going to get appointed to the council, the strategic plan, and this is very important. This is what the council is all about, is to develop a strategic plan for a space industry. The cost, of course, money's always a big issue. Who's going to pay the consultants that are going to have to come in to help develop this report, compensation for the members of the council, staffing, and when it's to be submitted. So it's a very short bill and a very humble beginning for this project, but a very necessary beginning for this project. Like I said, I'm very excited about this, to see this happen. It hasn't passed the legislature yet, but I'm very confident that it will pass the legislature. And once it does, this will get the ball rolling. And when that report is finalized at the end of 2021, it'll basically come down to the point of whether this can be done, and if so, how it can be done, and possibly how much it's going to cost and what's going to be needed to do it. Like I said, I'm very enthusiastic. Of course, living here in New Hampshire, I'm kind of an anomaly in a sense, both in the legal community and in general, because I'm probably the only one involved really in outer space matters. So it's always good to have my neighbor right across the border, actually the border's just a few miles away, exploring the potential of bringing the space industry to Maine. Of course, being a space lawyer and a space enthusiast myself, it excites me to know that someday, actual satellite launches may occur from the state of Maine. I can actually go see a satellite launch without having to fly down to Florida and such. But this is an exciting development. As you can tell by my enthusiasm, I'm excited about it as well. And a lot of people that I've talked to who've been very involved in this are excited about it as well. So in the future, you can possibly think, when you think of Maine, you can think of lobsters, potatoes, and outer space. It's a few years off still, but the important first step is being taken right now, and I'm very excited for the future. So again, until next time, hopefully we're going to start churning out these at least one video a week here to discuss topics like this. And until the next video, I will talk to you then. Have a good weekend.